Hey, 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 what is going on, IK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we are going to be touching on, man, there's a lot of videos I'm hopefully going to try and get out today, but one of the things I really wanted to touch on was this article that I just came across from one of our newly migrated or immigrated players into 79, and I thought this was really interesting because and this is one of the things I love about the Daily Talk section. And before I dive into that, of course, as always, make sure you guys sub, like, ring that notification bell, and of course you guys can join our Discord to join our conversation. Now, for those of you who may not dabble or illuminate yourself in Daily Talks, it's just this, gazebo-like building. You click Daily Talks, right? And you can see featured articles, you can see hot articles, right? You can see guides, you can see war, social, you can see new for people that just posted articles here. And one of the things I like going through these, on somewhat of a daily, I'd say every other day basis, I'll look into it. And I just like to see what is, what has been posted, what is something that, again, albeit the language I can read, outside of maybe doing some translations. But one of the things I wanted to touch on here was something that I saw here. Oh God, where was it? Server, oh my God, I swear I just had it here. Okay, here we go. So this article was posted and featured, right? It's called "The Tragic Fate of Server 98's Western Community," and right, I thought this was really interesting read, right? It only has 5 upvotes, right? This is from Ken, who wrote this, and I had just got done reading it, and it was interesting just to kind of get the perspective from just someone who was in a server and could really detail out timelines for occurrences and then providing just more context on what happened. Right, some of you have heard me talk about server 97, right, being the kind of contention of legends server, and kind of a lot of the kind of macro big picture things that befell that type of a server from the influx of the new Asian regions that opened up from servers 94 to 97. Right, prior to 98 and then so on and so forth opening up, because it was a 4-server batch that initially came. And so as I'm reading this, right, which I want to say is actually a really good article, and again, not only for Ken, but even someone like Ruli, I shout out to Ruli from Top, because he writes and is really getting a lot more into the written content. And I love reading these pieces of written content, especially when they give you either a different way of looking at something, right? If you just want a visual kind of text-based view instead of maybe watching a video, if you want to read the history on some servers, on things that happened, right, that really provide kind of an objective viewpoint, right? I know it's hard and difficult at times when people are writing up articles, especially if it's a server you play in, to not feel some type of way about that server and kind of, even if it's indirect or accidental, include some bias. And so as I'm reading this, I really liked the objective approach on how Ken viewed the server as an officer in an alliance from things he saw occurring. Right, and I just want to touch on a few things, and then I'm going to talk about it on high level. So it just starts off with Server 98, right, a server torn by war that is now completely run by Korean alliances, void of any Western communities. This is the server that I will talk about in this article, as it is the server I come from and have just recently immigrated from. I will be covering a short span of 40 days, as he observed as an officer of 2 alliances, and finally the reasoning behind the mass immigration of 60 international players towards Server 79. Of course, mild shout out to our server in 79, but the point I really want to focus on is what happened in 98, because I think that is the actual story here. So he starts off here, and we're just going to kind of skim through and do kind of, more highlight Cliff Note version. But he starts off is that, right, to celebrate 97 was under the contention order. This meant that 98 was going to be kind of the first standard, even though technically 94 really was. But if you just want to consider, like, the first solo server that was released, yes, 98 really was going to be that. So 98's released, he says, a small group of international players jumped events occurring before the changes made to jumpers on the 11th, and they arrived in the server founding the alliance named King. Now, I actually spoke to this alliance initially when they came over. I believe the leader for that alliance, if I can recall correctly, and they had asked me, because I guess they had one or a few players that were not able to make the jump over because they ended up changing the jumping rules on that day. Now, the majority of them get in. Right next was the competition phase. He says a large influx of Korean players made their way to the first standard server released. They unlike it, there was the highest concentration of Korean players and creators as well in Vetus. And this is pretty standard because, again, you have to think about it. When you release a batch of servers like 94, 95, 96, and 97, what ends up happening is you're spreading out players between those servers. So you're going to have some imbalance here, some imbalance there, but then when you eventually come out with one server where everyone that's downloading the game is going to get influx to, right, 98 is probably going to see a large portion of that. And so now you get to this point where 98 kind of is arguably could be the next big 97. So now he says for the next month, 98 was a server torn by war. There were few attempts at diplomacy. The war allowed the YouTubers to deliver action-packed live streams that entertained their viewers. Over time, however, players began to realize while the war was entertaining, it hindered progress tremendously. King reached out for diplomacy, but the mindsets of the server were not the same. While some wanted to play the game for a long time and therefore desired peace so they could grow, others wanted immediate entertainment and therefore war. He says the kingdom began to ally itself with the rest of Yidvia. One of these was communication, where there was a lack of exchange between members and leadership. And even within leadership, members were left guessing what the next move would be or the reasoning behind an attack. He says as an officer in one of the alliances, he had been told that a capture had been agreed upon. Our leader wasn't able to make to the predetermined time, so he took it upon himself to lead the attack, right, as a good officer would, in my opinion. Yet I began receiving messages stating that the capture hadn't been agreed upon, and that's when the fall of the kingdom began. Within 3 hours, the top alliance within the Yidvia kingdom and one of the top 3 within the server completely fell apart and disbanded. Arguments arose between leaders about city distribution, lack of communication, and the overall state of the server. Rather than resolving this contempt that had finally been unleashed, leaders of the kingdom resorted to accusing the other alliances of being greedy and constantly whining. All right, let's, as my buddy Shadow would say, let's get our Sunny D and our Fruity Pebbles out. Leadership of Vice immediately began working on migration. There was no hope for the Western community as the Korean alliances searched to eliminate the foreigners from the server. The mindset of utter domination had finally set as their strongest opposition, gosh, I need to be able to use words, was taken down to miscommunication. They hit cities, and when retaliated, they questioned our actions. Bro and these fantastic people here were now at the very top of the power hierarchy, and due to them being allies that shared the same mindset, all hope was lost in the Yidvia kingdom, and the few individuals who didn't agree within the Vetus kingdom, the migration target ended up being Server 79, a server known for enforcing rules and preserve peace and allows players to grow. Okay, so this part here, I'm going to kind of end on, and then I want to hit on a few notes. He says, so what I'm trying to communicate through this small story, the biggest threat to massively multiplayer games that pit hundreds of players against each other is not an overwhelming army or an unlimited wallet, but rather miscommunication. So what I want to say and talk about here are a few big points, right? Number one is Server 98. And this is something that, again, if you've played Kingdom Builders a while, you most likely know could happen. When you decide, right, first off, if you asked me, boss, would you jump? Would you take a group, whether it's one alliance, multiple alliances, and jump to a server after a new region or a couple new regions were unlocked and you're finally seeing an influx of Asian players? I would say that is a strong heck no, sir. I would not do that. Why would I not do that? Because you're getting a strong influx of Asian players. And for people that have played Kingdom Builders for a while, you know that Asian players, they are die-hard, like gamers, at just heart. And a good amount of them, more often than not, you'll probably see a higher average amount of spenders in those servers. And so, no, I would never have gone to 98. I never would have gone to... I would never have... Even now, right? I would probably wait till, like, server 150 is released, right? For it to die down a little bit, for you to start getting a little bit more of a healthy mix, right? And I would look at servers 1 through 93... No, 94, 95, 96, yeah, 93, 1 through 93, right, as your kind of NA European servers to focus on, and then eventually once servers eventually stabilize and they even out, and you're not getting this extreme influx of kind of an Asian representation for the player base, right, then you can go ahead and jump. Then you can go ahead and take some of your accounts there, or if you want to go and do that. Otherwise, again, joining, and this all goes back to what I've said numerous times, joining an older server, especially one that fits your playstyle, right? Whether that's you wanting to join a unified server that focuses on development, you want a little PvP here, you want a lot of PvP, you just want server-wide PvP, find a server that's good for you. But looking at a server that is older is more to your benefit as a new player, because you are going to develop your account faster in an older server, and then eventually you can leave if you want to and join a server you really want to play in. Now, if you're the type of person who you just want to be the day oneer, you want to play from day one so you can see how a server develops, be a part of the Chronicle timeline, completely understand that. I would still recommend doing that with a second account and not necessarily your main, for the obvious reasons. As you're really only going to miss out on a few things in the beginning, and it's not detrimental at all to your overall gaming experience. Your overall gaming experience is actually going to be a lot healthier if you join a server you can progress your account faster in. The next thing I want to touch on that was mentioned in the article, right, was, and we'll get to the communication part, but the challenge of diplomacy, right, in more often than not, right, and this comes back down to something I've touched on before, that when you're going to jump to a new server, you have to do it with a lot of alliances. You can't just go in with one alliance, right? You're basically, especially in servers, and more so, that after 94 was released, because of the Asian influx of players that are coming in. And from this, or I should just say kind of like Asia region-based players that are coming in. And again, it all just comes down to, right, if you want to do it, like you look at an example of how, right, the projects that I've ran in servers, and how when it came to server 8, 36, and now more so 79, right, we had an immediate foothold. Those projects from day one had an immediate foothold and the majority big presence in those servers, right? Where we were able to, essentially manage the server how we had planned. And it doesn't mean that that's a good or a bad thing, because it is subjective based on how players look at it, right? Because some players, keep in mind, when you go into a server, you're going to get players that feel a certain type of way about everything. You're going to have people on this side of the fence, that side of the fence, this corner, that corner, top, bottom, left, right. And it could be anything from you having some players in your server that just want nothing but war, and other people that want nothing but development. And then you're going to get anything and everything in between, right? That's normal, right? And so the whole reason you go in with a big enough group is so you can shape the server and provide a direction in where your group's efforts want to take the server. Right, and then it's just a matter of the people that want to play in that server and view things similarly will stay. People that don't will either leave, cause a ruckus, and, maybe stop playing, or just keep being a ruckus. Maybe they're going to be oh God, what's that guy's name? I keep forgetting his name. I love this guy so much. Maybe there'll be a something warrior. I'm forgetting what the guy's name is. Someone's going to remind me in the comments. Right, but yeah, maybe you'll be a warrior type player where you just, you're just going to fight to the end nonstop all day long, like an Energizer Bunny, and you just never run out of juice. In me saying all of this is to hopefully inform you, the player, that, right, even if you are in a server where you have like a 95% approval rating, you are still going to have players, no matter what, that will be against whatever you put into place. And then there's just going to be people who just view things on the opposite side. And you know what? That's okay. But those players and or groups just need to realize that, look, if you're not the majority presence in a server, right, then that's okay, right? You can still migrate out to a server that you want to play in, or you get in line, or you cause a ruckus, and then, you know, people are just going to start attacking you. I mean, you really have limited options at that point. And this is similar to what Ken's situation is, and how, from his perspective and viewpoint, S98 played out, where he felt that, or he and others felt that there was just not options left because people didn't want to work on diplomacy. And then you eventually get to the communication part here, where he just felt that things were just not communicated well. And sometimes that can be a challenge when you have a language barrier, right? It just means you have to work harder. A good example, I was talking with some players that speak Korean, and 2 of them came in to server 79, but before they did, because they were over 1 mil power, I sat down and talked with them. Right? I got them into a channel on our server where we have a translate bot, and we were just going back and forth. I was making sure to use very simple words. I wasn't using, I want to say something like conjunctions, but in the event that that is not the right way to say it, do not butcher me. Essentially just not using, you know, if I was to say couldn't, right, where it would have the apostrophe T, right, I would use could not. These types of things when you're communicating, right, and you're having to translate languages, is very important, so that way you have a higher chance, a percentage chance, of the conversation being communicated where you don't need as much follow-up, right? You don't have to reiterate or say something another way if you just try and use the most basic form of your language in the way that your language is written. That was some advice I was given once, is that if you don't try and use words that would appeal to, you know, another language, use words that are typically used in your native language, but just use the simplified or the basic version of them, even if it takes longer to write out, because that will be more easily translated. I do not know if that's the case or not, but that was some advice I was given once. So far, it's worked out well in my experience. And to that point, there's so many things that come down. You look at 98, right? Did the other alliances even want to communicate? Were they just leading people along? Is this the first time they've played Kingdom Builders? Did the people in leadership, have they played before? Have they not played? Have they played in servers longer than a year? There are so many X factors that go into everything that led up to what it did, right? At least from Ken's perspective, right? Where he felt it was just a big miscommunication at the end of the day, or could also be said as a lack of communication. So anyways, I just thought this article was really interesting, and I do recommend anyone reading it, along with just kind of perusing the daily talks. Right, I think this is a great place where where players can go in here. You can look at updated videos from a lot of different creators, or I should say content officers. And again, just nice to see. Something that was a fresh perspective, a read that I at least enjoyed. And again, shout out to Ken as well for writing that. That's it for me. Let me know what you guys think about the article. Are you someone from Server 98? If so, did you find some of the things we talked about? Did you read Ken's article? Did you think it was accurate? Do you have a different perspective on how you felt things happened? Do you think it came down to miscommunication or lack thereof? Was it something else? Let me know anything and everything you guys are thinking, of course, in those comments down below. That is it for me. I'm signing off. Until next time, we'll catch you later.